Hey, economic warriors. Welcome back to Boss Economics World, where we slice through the government's baloney, dice up their economic mismanagement, and serve you the sizzling truth, all with a side of satire. I'm your host, the guy who'd rather milk data than cows, and today, oh boy, do we have a juicy economic car crash to dissect. Switzerland, land of chocolate, watches, and apparently, a government ready to sell out its farmers faster than you can say, tariff tantrum. We've got Trump, trade deals, and a Swiss agricultural lobby that's more powerful than a yodeling avalanche. But behind the cowbells and cheese, there's a deeper story of economic recklessness, government cowardice, and a global trade system that's about as stable as a Jenga tower in a windstorm. Buckle up, folks, this is gonna be a wild ride. Let's start with the headlines, shall we? Switzerland, that picturesque postcard of Alpine serenity, is locking horns with none other than Donald Trump, the self-proclaimed Tariff Man, over a potential U.S. trade deal. And guess who's caught in the crossfire? Swiss farmers, those guardians of cowbells, cheese, and a national identity so pastoral it makes The Sound of Music look like a gritty crime drama. Now, Trump, being Trump, wants to flood the world with American beef, soybeans, and corn, you know, the stuff that's piling up in U.S. warehouses faster than his tweets during a late-night Twitter rant. And Switzerland, bless its heart, is dangling on the edge of a deal that could see its sacred agricultural sector get steamrolled by American exports. Swiss President Keller-Sutter, in a move that smells suspiciously of desperation, is pushing hard for this deal, even after dodging Trump's 31% tariffs on Swiss goods just hours before he hit the pause button on his global trade tantrums. But here's the kicker, folks, Swiss farmers aren't just some quaint backdrop for tourist selfies. They're a political juggernaut, wielding influence so outsized it's like watching a chihuahua pin a Great Dane. According to an analysis by Swiss national broadcaster SRF, a quarter of lawmakers in Switzerland's lower house are either farmers or have ties to agriculture. 3 out of 7 federal council members grew up on farms, and 1 was even a farmer's apprentice. Talk about a government that's literally rooted in the soil. And these farmers? They're not messing around. Sandra Helfenstein from the Swiss Farmers Association has already declared they'll vehemently fight any changes to their cozy, subsidized agricultural bubble. But here's where the real drama unfolds. Switzerland's agriculture sector, for all its cultural clout, accounts for less than 1% of the country's GDP. Yes, you heard that right, less than 1%. Meanwhile, the US is Switzerland's biggest single trading partner outside the EU, with bilateral trade worth $73 billion in 2024, according to the US Trade Representative. So, the Swiss government is stuck between a rock and a hard place: take a brutal economic hit by snubbing the US, or face a political uprising by torching its farmers. Now, if this doesn't scream government mismanagement, I don't know what does. You've got a government so spineless it's practically begging Trump to steamroll its own people, all for the sake of a trade deal that might not even save their economy. But hold on, folks, we're just scratching the surface. Let's dig deeper into this economic dumpster fire. Now, let's peel back the layers of this Swiss cheese, had to, and look at the real economic issues bubbling under the surface. This isn't just about farmers versus Trump, it's about a government that's been playing economic roulette with its trade policies, its agricultural subsidies, and its national priorities. And spoiler alert, the House always wins, and the House in this case is global trade chaos. Switzerland prides itself on being a global trade darling, with an export-driven economy that's the envy of many. In 2024, exports accounted for 74% of its GDP, according to the World Bank, one of the highest ratios in the world. But here's the catch: that dependency makes Switzerland terrifyingly vulnerable to trade disruptions, especially when dealing with a loose cannon like Trump. The US, as Switzerland's second-largest export market, bought $37 billion worth of Swiss goods in 2024, from pharmaceuticals to precision machinery. Meanwhile, Switzerland's unilateral decision to abolish tariffs on all industrial products in 2024, a move hailed as a bold step toward free trade, has left it with precious few bargaining chips in negotiations with the US. Let me get this straight: the Swiss government thought it could just waltz into a trade deal with Trump, the guy who thinks negotiation means bully until you win, with no leverage. This is like showing up to a gunfight with a butter knife. And who pays the price? The farmers, the consumers, and ultimately, the entire economy. Now, let's talk about Switzerland's agricultural sector, or as I like to call it, the government's pet economic dinosaur. Switzerland runs one of the most heavily subsidized and protected agricultural markets in the world. According to the OECD, Swiss farmers received $6.2 billion in subsidies in 2024, accounting for 54% of their gross farm receipts, the highest support level among developed economies. Meanwhile, Swiss consumers pay the highest food prices in Europe, with beef tariffs as high as 22 francs, $26, per kilogram, nearly doubling the average sales price. And for what? To protect an industry that contributes less than 1% to GDP and employs just 3% of the workforce, according to Eurostat. Compare that to the US, where agriculture accounts for 5.4% of GDP and is a global export juggernaut, producing $177 billion in exports in 2024, per the USDA. The Swiss system is a relic of a bygone era, propped up by a government too afraid to modernize and too beholden to political cronies to care about economic efficiency. Here's the real crime, folks: the Swiss government has spent decades subsidizing an industry that's economically irrelevant, all while gouging its own consumers and leaving its trade negotiators with nothing but crumbs to offer the US. This isn't protectionism, it's economic masochism. Zoom out even further, and you'll see this Swiss-US showdown isn't happening in a vacuum. We're in the middle of a global trade war, folks, and governments everywhere, including Switzerland's, are fumbling the ball. Trump's "America First" policies have already destabilized global trade, with $1.7 trillion in goods affected by new tariffs since 2018, according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization, which Switzerland hosts in Geneva and claims to champion, is teetering on the brink of irrelevance, with its appellate body paralyzed by US obstructionism as of 2025. And what's Switzerland's response? To double down on a trade deal with the US that could undermine its own agricultural sector, all while pretending it's a win for economic prosperity. This is the economic equivalent of jumping out of a plane without a parachute and hoping the landing is soft. Let me break it down for you, folks. The Swiss government is so busy kissing Trump's ring that it's forgotten its own people, its own economy, and its own principles. And this, my friends, is what happens when you let politicians play poker with your economic future. They bluff, they lose, and we all pay the price. At the heart of this Swiss-US trade saga is a government that's been asleep at the wheel, steering its economy straight into a recessionary ditch. Let's connect the dots: Switzerland's over-reliance on exports, its refusal to modernize its agricultural sector, and its naive approach to trade negotiations with a bully like Trump are all symptoms of a deeper disease: economic mismanagement. And the data backs this up. Switzerland's GDP growth slowed to 0.7% in 2024, according to the IMF, down from 2.6% in 2022, as global trade tensions and a strong Swiss franc hammered its export sector. Unemployment, while still low at 4.2%, is creeping up, and consumer confidence, as measured by the KOF Swiss Economic Institute, hit its lowest level since the 2020 pandemic in April 2025. Meanwhile, the government's fiscal position is weakening, with public debt projected to rise to 45% of GDP by 2026, per the Swiss National Bank, as it struggles to balance subsidies, tax cuts, and trade concessions. This, folks, is what a government-induced recession looks like: slow, painful, and entirely preventable. The Swiss government has spent years papering over its economic cracks with subsidies and trade gimmicks, and now, when the world is on fire, it's got nothing left to offer but a smile and a handshake. And who suffers? You, me, and every hardworking Swiss citizen who just wants a fair shot at prosperity. So, where does this leave Switzerland, and the rest of us watching this economic train wreck unfold? Here's the Boss Economics World Hot Take, backed by the latest data and a healthy dose of skepticism about government competence. 1. Switzerland's farmers are toast, unless they adapt. The harsh reality is that Switzerland's agricultural sector, as it currently exists, is unsustainable. The US will likely force concessions, just as it did with banking secrecy in 2013, and the Swiss government, too weak to resist, will cave. But here's the silver lining: this could be a chance to modernize. Look at New Zealand, which slashed agricultural subsidies in the 1980s and saw its farm sector become a global export powerhouse, contributing 12% to GDP by 2024, per the World Bank. Switzerland could follow suit, but only if its government stops coddling inefficiency. 2. Trump's trade deals are a mirage, don't fall for it. For all of Switzerland's desperation, a US trade deal is no golden ticket. Look at the UK, which signed a framework deal with the US in May 2025, only to see its beef exports to the US plummet by 15% due to retaliatory EU tariffs, according to the UK Department for International Trade. Trade deals with Trump are less about mutual prosperity and more about political theater, and Switzerland is about to learn that lesson the hard way. 3. The global economy is bleeding, and governments are the culprits. This Swiss-US saga is just one symptom of a global economy on life support, thanks to government mismanagement. From the US's tariff wars to the EU's bureaucratic inertia, governments worldwide are failing to adapt to a new economic reality. Global trade growth is projected to slow to 2.5% in 2025, down from 5.1% in 2021, per the WTO, and recessions are looming in Germany, Italy, and potentially Switzerland. Until governments stop playing politics with trade and start prioritizing economic resilience, we're all in for a bumpy ride. And there you have it, folks, another episode of Boss Economics World, where we expose the government's economic clownery and serve up the truth, no holds barred. Switzerland's trade deal drama is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's a stark reminder of what happens when you let politicians play fast and loose with your economy. So, what do you think? Should Switzerland stand up to Trump, or is it time to ditch the cowbells and embrace the future? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe for more economic truth bombs. Until next time, stay savvy, stay skeptical, and remember, the only thing more inflated than government promises is their egos.